What is up, wrestling fans? Richard Woodrow here. Welcome back to episode number 7 of Pro Wrestling Slam for October the 6th, 2020 for ProWrestlingSlam.net, putting the pro back in pro wrestling. For episode number 7, guys, I'm really happy and excited to talk about the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, more specifically, the 10 pounds of gold belt, arguably in the top 5 of pro wrestling World Heavyweight Championships. It's a fan favorite for most wrestling fans, including myself. So today I'm going to talk about the belt. I'm going to give you a little brief history of the 10 pounds of gold, or the globed belt, as some wrestling fans will call it. And then I'm going to share my thoughts of what I thought about, the belt overall. And so I'm going to jump right into it. So I'm going to give you some basic cliff notes on the 10 pounds of gold. So if there's something that I've missed or if I skimmed over, just, give me some feedback here on Anchor. If you follow Anchor, just leave a message. Or if there's something that I missed, you can hit me up on Twitter at PW_slam. So I'll give you a brief little cliff notes history. So the NWA World title, the title was first activated on July 14th, 1948 in Des Moines, Iowa, when the NWA, National Wrestling Alliance, was formed. Orville Brown was crowned the first NWA heavyweight champion, defeating Sonny Myers. Basically, the NWA was a governing body that wrestling promotions can opt into to join, and the NWA World Champion would travel from territory to territory and defend the title against each promotion's top star. Each promotion that was a member of the NWA would have to recognize the NWA World Champion as the World Heavyweight Champion, but each promotion basically can still have its own world champion, quote-unquote, within its own promotion. The 10 pounds of gold belt itself debuted on July 20th, 1973. It was presented to Harley Race by then NWA President Sam Muchnick, and the belt was the representative title of the NWA until 1986. And then, on February 14th, 1986, at Battle of the Belts 2, under Jim Crockett Promotions and Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, the 10 pounds of gold was replaced by the big gold belt that most wrestling fans of a certain age recognize. Then champion Ric Flair debuted the belt when he wrestled Barry Windham. So the NWA 10 pounds of gold belt was replaced by the big gold belt. And, there's some contention between, amongst wrestling fans that which is the better belt, the 10 pounds of gold or the big gold belt. I think overall, the big gold belt is more recognizable to a lot of wrestling fans because, when you see the big gold belt, most wrestling fans automatically think of Ric Flair, Sting, those sort of guys, Hulk Hogan, when the NWA, eventually became, when Jim Crockett Promotions eventually became, WCW, when Jim Crockett Promotions was bought out by Turner in '88 and, became the WCW World Heavyweight title, the big gold belt. But, me as an older wrestling fan, I'm 42 years old. So I think the 10 pounds of gold, to me, is the more recognizable belt because it was, it's the belt that I'm a little bit more familiar with. And so the 10 pounds of gold was reactivated in 1993 after the NWA gained new members, and in August 1994, the NWA held a tournament for the vacated title at the ECW. Back then, ECW was the Eastern Championship Wrestling Arena. Said tournament was won by Shane Douglas. After winning the title, he denounced it by throwing it down and proclaimed himself the first Extreme Championship Wrestling World Heavyweight Champion. And after that, ECW quickly withdrew itself from the NWA after that incident. So most wrestling fans in the 90s definitely remember that iconic promo by Shane Douglas. He takes the NWA 10 pounds of gold belt, looks at it, throws it down, basically says that he's not, denouncing the NWA, that he's the first Extreme Championship Wrestling World Heavyweight Champion, and thus ECW, that most wrestling fans know of today, was born on that day in August of 1994. So in November of 1994, the NWA held another tournament to crown a new NWA World Champion in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, co-hosted by Jim Cornette and Dennis Coralluzzo. Chris Candido won that tournament to become the new NWA World Champion. Candido dropped the title to UFC fighter Dan the Beast Severn in February 1995. So Severn defended the title sparingly from 95 to 98 because around that time, in the mid-90s, mid to late 90s, there wasn't a whole lot of decent competition for Severn to face off for the NWA 10 pounds of gold title. So, he would defend it sparingly. So in 1998, under the direction of Jim Cornette, who was running Smoky Mountain Wrestling at that time, the NWA briefly joined the WWF, or WWE. Basically, what Cornette's vision was to try and put the NWA back in the national spotlight, as it did way back in the 80s and 70s. But after limited success, Vince McMahon axed the deal between Cornette's NWA and the WWF, and the 10 pounds of gold was back on the independent circuit and the remaining NWA territories at that time. So, it was a valiant effort by Jim Cornette, to bring the NWA back into the national spotlight. But, most wrestling fans of the Attitude Era around that time, honestly, they really didn't give a shit about the NWA. And when you had guys like Jeff Jarrett, representing the NWA, who was, wasn't that overly popular with wrestling fans at that time. You had the Rock and Roll Express, and, you had the Midnight Express that would try and come in and, revitalize the NWA of old. It really didn't mesh well with, wrestling fans of the 90s. So in 2002, speaking of Jeff Jarrett's TNA, Total Nonstop Action, they formed an alliance with the NWA, and TNA used the 10 pounds of gold belt as its representative title until 2007, when the NWA agreement with TNA ended. So from 2002, 2007, in that 5-year period, Jeff Jarrett, he brought back the 10 pounds of gold belt, and there were so many phenomenal wrestlers in that 5-year span, and TNA had that title. AJ Styles, arguably in the top 5 greatest technical wrestlers of all time. He's right up there with Shawn Michaels. And so Jeff Jarrett, he made a good run with the 10 pounds of gold in that 5-year stretch. So on May 22nd, 2007, the NWA held a 16-man tournament, calling it Reclaiming the Glory, to crown a new NWA World Heavyweight Champion. And Adam Pearce won that tournament and became the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. So on October 27th, 2012, after the final match of Adam Pearce and Colt Cabana's 7 Levels of Hate series, which Cabana won, both wrestlers broke kayfabe, with Cabana declaring that Pearce was the rightful champion and did not want the title, due to the NWA not sanctioning the match. But Pearce didn't want the title either, basically. Both wrestlers left the ring and the title behind. So, the 10 pounds of gold title was kind of in limbo around that time. So on May 1st, 2017, Smashing Pumpkins lead singer Billy Corgan, under his parent company, Lightning One Incorporated, purchased the NWA, including its trademarks, name, championships, and rights. Corgan officially took control of the company on October 1st, 2017, and subsequently all current NWA affiliation agreements were nullified. All NWA titles except the NWA World Championship, which was renamed the NWA World Championship, and the NWA World Women's Championship were vacated. The NWA from that point ceased being a governing body in professional wrestling. So that's the nuts and bolts, like I said, the Cliff Notes history of the NWA and the 10 pounds of gold title. So I'm going to take a quick commercial break, and you're going to hear from my friends at Anchor, and I'll be back in 30 seconds, guys. All right, we're back, wrestling fans. And for those of you who just catching the latter half of this episode, it's episode number 7 of Pro Wrestling Slam, and I'm talking about the 10 pounds of gold, the NWA World Heavyweight title. So, like I said, before the commercial break, I gave a very brief Cliff Notes history of the NWA as a whole, and, a little bit of history of the 10 pounds of gold title itself. And, like I said, when it comes to the big gold belt, or the 10 pounds of gold belt, for me personally, the 10 pounds of gold titles is more recognizable, because that title itself, that title belt, has such a rich history. And, the phenomenal wrestlers and Hall of Famers that have carried that title, Harley Race, Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair, Kerry Von Erich, Terry Funk, Jack Briscoe. And getting on the topic of Harley Race, he was an 8-time NWA World Heavyweight Champion. He had 8 title reigns for a total of 1,802 days. So if Harley Race had a consecutive title reign, for 1,802 days, that would equate to 4.94 years. So that, back in that era, the 70s and 80s of professional wrestling, that was extremely, extremely impressive. The only other wrestler to rival the amount of time holding a championship was obviously Bruno Sammartino. He held it for close to 8 years. So Harley Race, definitely an icon when it comes to the 10 pounds of gold title. And like I said at the top of the show, I mean, the 10 pounds of gold title is definitely in my Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling title belts. You have the 10 pounds of gold belt, the NWA belt, and then you have the WWF Winged Eagle from 1988 to 1998, the WWF Intercontinental title from 1987 to 1998, or what I call the Randy Savage belt, and the iconic big gold belt that, wrestlers are like Ric Flair, Sting, Goldberg, Hollywood Hulk Hogan, Booker T, that title is in there as well. So that's my Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling title belts. And I'm sure, a lot of wrestling fans have various, their own opinions on, what title belts make the Mount Rushmore. So if you want to delve into the rich history of the 10 pounds of gold belt even further, I have a phenomenal book that I'd like to recommend. And it's called 10 Pounds of Gold, A Close Look at the NWA World Championship Belt. It was co-written by Dave Millican. Dave Millican is a crafter of championship belts. He's crafted some of the most iconic professional wrestling belts in history. And it's co-written by Dick Bourne. And it's really, really an excellent book on the rich history of the 10 pounds of gold belt. And it's highly recommended. I read it a few years ago. I may go back and reread it, in the next couple of months there during my hiatus from work. But it's a really, really phenomenal book. I'm sure you can get it online through Amazon Kindle, or if you want to buy a hard copy. So again, it's called The 10 Pounds of Gold, A Close Look at the NWA World Championship Belt, co-written by Dave Millican and Dick Bourne. So definitely check out that book, if you want to read further into the, the phenomenal history of the 10 Pounds of Gold title. So, well, that's going to do it for episode number 7 of Pro Wrestling Slam. I hope everyone that tuned in, I hope you enjoyed this episode. So if you have any feedback on this episode or previous episodes, whether it's positive or negative, if you use Anchor, you can leave a message and I'll play it for you, play your feedback on future episodes. So if you want to check out the official website of Pro Wrestling Slam, it's prowrestlingslam.net. We always have the latest news in professional wrestling. We have a slew of great interviews. Our latest interview, print interview as I call it, is with former TNA Knockouts champion Taylor Wilde. You can check us out on Twitter at PW_Slam. You can follow us there. Check out our official Facebook page. We have close to 15,000 likes and follows on that. So it's facebook.com/Pro Wrestling Slam. You can follow our official YouTube channel where this episode and past episodes of Pro Wrestling Slam are uploaded. So just go to the YouTube search bar and type up Pro Wrestling Slam ! And you'll find the channel there. So I will be back next week with a brand new episode of Pro Wrestling Slam. So I hope everyone has an awesome day. Take it easy, guys.